Hey, everybody. It's great to have you with us. We are incredibly honored today to have with us Mr. Roger Stone again. He's a man who obviously needs no introduction. Incredibly interesting person who's been involved in the politics of the United States for many decades. Been an advisor to Donald Trump going back to the 1980s. Roger, thank you so much for being with us again.
Alex, it's great to see you again, and it's particularly great to have my First Amendment rights back and have the ability to discuss not only my case, but the American political scene. It just seems un American that a federal judge can, with a snap of a finger, deprive you of your free speech rights, deprive you of the right to defend yourself, while the fake news media, the corporately owned media, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, are fabricating lie after lie after lie about you and the president and the situation in America, and you are prohibited from responding. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity.
Hey, well, we're grateful to have you. Thank you so much, Roger. So let's get right into it. I know you're supposed to be heading off to prison here very soon. A lot of people are looking at this case, and it really looks fishy. You have high-ranking Democrats that everybody knows have been committing very serious crimes, and they're running around like nothing. Has there been a double standard? Is there an injustice being perpetrated here against you, Roger? And also some of the other people involved with President Trump. General Mike Flynn comes to mind. Also, Paul Manafort. What's going on here? Do you think this is an injustice, and is this a deliberate effort to target people who have been close to Donald Trump or who've helped Donald Trump in some way?
I think most Americans understand that I was a political target. For well over a year, you could read and hear on television that I would be charged with treason, espionage, colluding with the Russians, cyber crimes, the receipt of stolen emails, and so on. None of that was true. There was no evidence to that effect. So ultimately, Andrew Weissman, an epically corrupt federal prosecutor, hooked up a really contrived indictment that claimed that I lied to Congress specifically about the Trump campaign's interest in the WikiLeaks disclosures. Not that I had them and gave them to anybody, not that I had advanced knowledge of the source or content, but simply that I hid the campaign's interest in them, which is absurd because President Trump, then candidate Trump, openly discussed the WikiLeaks disclosures on 142 occasions in September and October. That statistic comes from MSNBC, by the way. So I had no crime to lie about. There is no underlying illegal activity for which I would have the motive to lie. It was a railroading, it was a Soviet style show trial in which I had a stacked jury, not a single Republican, not a single conservative, not a single member of the John Birch Society, not a single military veteran, not a single person with an education level below college, but a majority of the jurors having a post college degree, at least three attorneys on the jury, multiple jurors having served in previous Democratic administrations. This was a classic railroading, and I had a hostile judge who attacked me multiple times from the bench, which I think is prejudicial prior to finding a verdict. So it was a Kafka-esque experience. In other words, I thought I would be able to defend myself, but the judge systematically prohibited the strongest possible lines of defense. So when I tried to argue selective prosecution that Comey, Brennan, Clapper, and later McCabe, Strzok, Hillary herself, and others had lied under oath, I was disallowed. I couldn't argue that. I was prohibited from arguing that. The first 4 pages of my indictment allege that the Russians hacked the DNC and gave the information to WikiLeaks, implying that WikiLeaks gave it to me and that I gave it to Donald Trump. Completely false. I was not allowed to challenge that. I could have proved with forensic evidence and experts with NSA credentials that that actually never happened. The government has no evidence that that happens. It's interesting because once the government admitted in discovery that they relied entirely on the CrowdStrike report, the report of a Democratic based IT firm that was retained by the DNC, and that the FBI had never examined the Democratic National Committee servers, and that got some legs in the press. Jonathan Kravis, the assistant U.S. attorney, filed a surreply with the court saying, "We do have additional information, Your Honor. Stone is incorrect, but we cannot make it public because it's classified under national security." In other words, Mr. Kravis defrauded the court. By the way, he just got a big appointment in Washington tomorrow. Wait until he sees the Rule 6 violations filings coming against him. There is no evidence. Put it on the table. So, but I was not allowed to argue any of that. It was really never a fair fight from the beginning. I had no qualms about pleading not guilty because I had not done anything wrong. And the implication that I had discussed the WikiLeaks disclosures with candidate Trump, according to Rick Gates, a convicted liar, for which the government produced no corroboration, no phone records, no witnesses, no eyewitnesses, even though supposedly, according to Gates, there were 2 Secret Service agents present at the time this happened, is a lie. By the way, he was let out of jail yesterday by the same judge.
Wow. So was this the swamp? Was this the deep state, Roger, coming after you? And have they gone also after Flynn and others? And what
I
do you
think
think it's
General
going to take to bring this all under control?
Well, there's no question that I was a political target for several reasons. First of all, because I wrote the book, The Clintons' War on Women, which is the definitive expose of Bill and Hillary Clinton and their treason and their corruption and their immorality. And therefore, I think that made me a target. The chief prosecutor in my case was Jeannie Ray, a woman who was Hillary Clinton's lawyer and who represented the Clinton Foundation prior to her service on the Mueller investigation. No prosecutorial experience. Then the case was turned over to one of the most corrupt individuals I have ever come across, Aaron Zelinsky, former counsel to the State Department under Hillary Clinton. The mainstream media insists on describing him as a career prosecutor. He's a political appointee, and he's an arrogant bully who also, I believe, violated the law in my prosecution. General Flynn, in my mind, is one of the great American patriots, and he's being punished because during the Clinton and Obama administration, he refused to stop saying that radical Islam is a real danger to America. He was targeted from the very beginning. General Flynn did not break the law. FBI agents who interviewed him said he did not break the law. His prosecution is, if anything, even worse than mine. It is a disgrace that this man, who gave 30 years of his life to serving his country, is being persecuted like this. So in many ways, I feel a kinship with him. And I obviously am praying that the president will provide executive relief to both General Flynn and myself, because that is the court of last resort. General Flynn at least has a special prosecutor now appointed to review his case. In my case, the judge issued an order last Thursday that ordered me to court within 2 weeks. That would be next Thursday. By the way, in case you hadn't noticed, we have a coronavirus epidemic going on, and nonviolent criminals are being released from prison, but not in my case.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's incredible, Roger. I think it's hard for the average American to understand just how wild all this is. So, obviously, Americans, if you want a pardon for General Flynn and for Roger Stone, you can contact the president. But Roger, what do we do about the broader systemic issues here, which is, this notion that we have a federal government that can go after anyone for any reason. They say they can indict a ham sandwich. They say that the average, Harry Silvergate says the average American commits 3 felonies a day. And it seems like we have very selective prosecution. They pick people that they don't like for political reasons, or, somebody who maybe has crossed the Clintons at some point. What do we do to fix this problem? Is that something the president can start addressing? Does it have to come from Congress? What needs to be done to make sure these kinds of abuses don't happen in the future?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand it took me a while to understand exactly why I had been targeted, because the decision to prosecute me was made long after Robert Mueller and his team of angry Democrats knew there was no Russian collusion. And the reason became clear on July 24th of 2019 when the prosecutors, in cryptic language, essentially offered me a deal. If I would dissemble about 36 phone calls that I'd had with candidate Trump during 2016, all of them longer than 30 minutes, they would work things out in terms of a lesser sentence for me. So they wanted me to turn on the president, and that's what this was really about.
So, Roger, this is obviously going to be a really interesting 2020 election season. It seems like candidate Biden has some really significant vulnerabilities. What do you think are the most serious vulnerabilities on his front? And should Donald Trump be exploiting them? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think he's essentially non compos mentis. I mean, he put the word dem in the word dementia. He doesn't really seem to be all there. I actually feel sorry for him. It has passed him by. He is too old to be running for president. There's a reason why all of his previous campaigns never got off the ground. He's a know it all. He's a loudmouth. He's a braggart. He comes across that way. He is constantly threatening physical violence against his opponents. I don't understand that, but he's done it in every single race. He was going to take Donald Trump out behind a gymnasium and beat him up in 2016. He threatened to take his opponent in one of his Senate races out behind the school gym and beat him up. Joe, you weigh 150 pounds and you'd go down with one punch. What are you talking about? He is personally responsible for the mass incarceration of more black people in this country than anybody other than Hillary Clinton and her husband. By his stewardship of the 1994 crime bill that he used to call the Biden bill, a bill that requires mandatory, harsh penalties for first-time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs, which has disproportionately jailed millions of black people and poor people, essentially for what is a public health problem. I'm not talking about drug kingpins and drug dealers. I'm talking about, the housewife who has a nickel bag in her purse to get through the day. That is a giant vulnerability. And I take these accusations of a sexual assault against him very seriously. Didn't the liberals tell us all women must be believed? That's exactly what they told us. When they came up with all of these totally baseless accusations against Judge Kavanaugh, we were expected and told repeatedly they must be believed because they're women, simply because they're women. By the way, since I was charged with lying to Congress, when will those women who testified under oath against Brett Kavanaugh, but who now admit they made it up, when are they being prosecuted? The answer is never. So I think Biden is an exceptionally weak candidate, but between voter fraud, internet censorship, and the mainstream media bias against Trump and for Biden, I still expect this to be a difficult race. I think the president will win because he's a superior campaigner and a superior communicator, but he has a lot of institutional norms against him because he rocks the boat. They like the status quo. They love the country hurtling towards globalism, hurtling towards mandatory vaccinations, hurtling towards one world government, and one man stands in the way, and he's one hell of a tough guy, Donald Trump.
So there's been a lot of talk about the Democrats maybe trying a Plan B strategy, maybe even potentially trying to replace Biden with another candidate, maybe Cuomo or Michelle Obama. Do you think that's a possibility? Might they try to remove Biden in light of all these? I mean, even the Democrats see a lot of these problems. Where do they go from here? I mean, do all they have left is just voter fraud and mainstream media bias, or are they going to try something else?
Well, that is an idea that is much more difficult to actually execute than it is on paper. There's no question that the professional Democrats grabbed Joe Biden as the only viable alternative they had to stop Bernie Sanders. They realized that Bernie Sanders' candidacy would be like another George McGovern. But they've grabbed a very weak standard bearer. But in order to get Joe Biden to drop his lifetime dream of being president after winning an improbable nomination will be almost impossible. Now, were he to, and we don't wish this, but were he to die or be incapacitated, then all of his delegates would be free to vote for someone else. But in many cases, those delegates are bound by law, at least for the first ballot, to vote for Joe Biden. While I think Governor Cuomo is also a superb communicator, The idea that he would submarine his career as a vice presidential candidate, I don't see that happening. He'd still like to be president in his own right someday, and perhaps he can win the nomination down the road. Michelle Obama's prospective candidacy has some legal flaws, which no one in the mainstream media wants to talk about. She changed her residence to the Cayman Islands for tax purposes, and under the Constitution, you have to be a resident of the United States, not only naturally born, whatever that means, but you have to have lived here for 15 consecutive years prior to the election. She does not meet that criteria. Whether you could sustain that argument in court, given what I've seen about the court system, is a very open question. But I actually believe that she is not legally qualified because she's not changed her residency back to the United States in time to be a candidate. More to come on that, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight into the politics of all this, Roger. I know you're one of the most insightful people on this front. And I want to ask you now, if you don't mind, a personal question. I was reading that you have had a come to Jesus moment, that you have become a Christian. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just, have you talk a little bit about that, your experience, what led you to that, and maybe how it's changed you. What's different now?
Well, I've always been a Christian. I was raised as a Roman Catholic. I am still a practicing Catholic. Doesn't mean I believe in all of the dogma of the Catholic Church, but I do believe in the Holy Trinity and Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of God. The fundamentals of Catholicism are the same as the fundamentals of Protestantism. And I really miss the fact that our local Catholic Church is now locked down because of the coronavirus. I admit that I had all my sacraments as a child, and I had Catholic education, but I had fallen away from the church. I lived some pretty wild times when I was younger, and I was under tremendous pressure. I had enormous anger and turmoil about this deep state effort to destroy me and my family simply because I was a loyal supporter of Donald Trump and I refused to turn on him. And then I had the opportunity to meet and pray with Reverend Franklin Graham. And I told him how upset I was, and he gave me the most solid advice you could have. He said, son, you don't need my help. You need God's help. If you will just confess your sins and get right with Jesus, invite Jesus into your heart, he will protect you. He will never abandon you. He is all powerful. Just surrender yourself to God and walk of faith, and your life will change. Everything will change. And then only minutes later, I attended an incredible revival that he was conducting in Boca Raton, Florida. 2,000 people, great cross population of Trump supporters, interestingly enough, people wearing Trump t-shirts and Trump hats, a middle class crowd, almost, I would say, a third African American, a third Hispanic, a third working class people, working class white people, all Christians, all friendly. Most of them, thanks to CNN, recognized me, so I posed for a lot of selfies that day. But there came a time during his sermon, as it were, when he called on those in the crowd who wanted to confess their sins and align their life with Jesus Christ, ask Christ into their heart, to stand and repeat a pledge. And I felt moved to do it. I just knew doing it, I had no embarrassment. I stood up with all of the others and I confessed that I am a sinner, that I have sinned, that I ask God to forgive me my sins, and that I would try, although we are all flawed, to live the Christian life and to turn my future over to God. And I must tell you, it was like a cement block had been lifted from my chest. I left that park with a sense of serenity and peace that I haven't known for a year. And then Franklin Graham sent me a Bible in which he had annotated certain sections for me to read, and I've read them over and over again. And it's why I'm so calm today, because my future is in the hands of Jesus Christ and God himself. I do believe they are all powerful. I do believe God knows everything. And look, Alex, I've been in politics a long time. It's a rough and tumble sport. You'll read in the national media over and over again, Roger Stone, self-described dirty trickster. I have never described myself that way. I made the LA Times retract that. There nowhere can you find me calling myself that. Democrats who I have beaten call me that. But I know there are those who will say, oh, this is Stone posturing. This is Stone in a head fake. This is Stone making a phony appeal for sympathy. No, that doesn't bother me. They said the same thing about Chuck Colson, the Watergate conspirator who went to prison, found Jesus Christ, and founded a prison ministry that's helped hundreds of thousands of people. They said the same thing about him, the cynics, the critics. I don't care. He, God, knows what's in my heart. And that's why I believe God will guide the president to do the right thing. I believe God will, in the end, provide justice for General Flynn, for myself, for others who have been destroyed in this deep state effort to end the Trump presidency. Let's be clear. The people who are trying to destroy me, and I would argue trying to kill me by sending me to a federal prison during the coronavirus crisis, are the same people who tried to set up and destroy Donald Trump. Thank God that I am just collateral damage and they didn't get him in their phony impeachment or their phony Russian hoax, Russian collusion delusion. At this point, I have no choice but to put my faith in Jesus. I have done so. They've destroyed me financially. I don't have much to fight with. People who want to help me can go to stonedefensefund.com, stonedefensefund.com. I depleted the almost $2 million that I raised from over 65,000 Americans for my initial trial. I have to raise money in the event that I should need to appeal. If you want to sign a petition to President Trump, you can go to freerogerstone.com. There's also an excellent petition for justice for General Flynn there. I would ask people to do that. As far as I am now concerned, this entire matter is in the hands of God Almighty.
Excellent, Roger. And if you would just give us some concluding thoughts, some parting thoughts on the injustice that's been done against you, against General Flynn, against other people who've been close to the president, and also, is there anything I didn't ask about that you want to mention? And please give us your websites once again so that people can follow up and see how they can help.
I have been prohibited for over 16 months from saying this simple thing, that I was the target of a political prosecution, that the prosecutors in my case were not career line prosecutors, as the Washington Post would tell you, but they were political apparatchiks of either Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. Look at their bios. They defrauded the court on multiple cases. They got search warrants to look into every nook and cranny of my life, my internet, my email, my text messages, my phone calls. By telling a federal judge they had evidence of mass laundering of millions of dollars of foreign campaign contributions. There was no evidence of that. That I was involved in cyber crimes, that I was involved in federal election violations. They found no evidence of that. That's why they had to hook up this contrived indictment for lying to Congress. Oh, my critics will say, you were also accused and convicted of witness tampering. Really? The witness in question denied on the stand and in a letter to the judge that he ever felt threatened. That didn't matter to an all-Democratic jury. So I want to thank all of those millions of Americans who are praying for me and my family. My wife is not well. She has taken this even harder than I have, but she is a trooper, and she has given me her completely loyal support in my decision not to plead guilty and try to save my own skin and lie, but to fight this out to the bitter end. So I thank all those people who are praying for us.
Well, Roger, thank you so much for being with us again. It's been such a pleasure. The last interviews that we did with you really they went wild on social media. So, thank you so much for your insight into politics. I know there's very few people in America who have this kind of insight into the political system. Folks out there, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please help us to get it out there. Like, share, subscribe. The big technology companies hate us. They hate anybody who contradicts the official narrative. And if you support Roger Stone, you saw his websites, go there, help him out if you're so inclined. Thank you all once again, and God bless.